What's up, everybody? This is That Blind Fox coming to you with my hopefully first of soon to be many wrestling podcast slash booking exercise things. Um, I have a bunch of ideas that have come to me recently, and I'd like to be able to express them in an appropriate manner. So the way I've decided to do it is what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick two guys today, and I'm gonna do a booking exercise on how I would rebook them if I was in charge of TNA Creative, how I would have brought them to their current status, how I would have reintroduced them to the audience, and just leading up to where they're currently at, where Austin Aries is the TNA Heavyweight Champion, and Zema is the X Division Champion. I'd bring them up to the point where they won those titles. So I guess I'll start with Austin Aries, seeming as I can stem off into Zema with him. Austin Aries, current World Heavyweight Champion, very over with the fans, very good wrestler, just a great worker all around, and very popular with the crowds, like I said. And I think there could have been a better way to do it. I think there could have been a much better way to bring him in, to make him the X Division Champion, and to bring him up to the levels of the heavyweight division title. So how did I done it? He was originally brought back to TNA in 2011 through this X Division Fatal 4-Way of guys who are not in TNA, and they're competing, and he won the contract among all those people. I would not have done that necessarily. I'd have done a tournament of young of up-and-coming X Division guys, veterans, and guys who've never been in the company. But I'd have bought him in months earlier than that. Destination X is in July. I'd have bought him in I started and brought him in May. But before that, maybe in April, I'd have been shooting vignettes. Because one of the greatest series of vignettes I've ever seen were the Mr. Perfect vignettes. And with Austin Aries, his moniker is the greatest man who ever lived. So you could play off of that element of those vignettes, but play off a more modern version of that, where they have the Dos Equis guy commercials. You know, the most interesting man in the world is the Dos Equis guy, the greatest man that ever lived, Austin Aries. What you can do is you could start airing vignettes where he's doing all of these things, very much like the Dos Equis guy, and you have him do these vignettes for 3, 4, 5 weeks on the show, just airing these vignettes of why he's the greatest man that ever lived. And the last one you do is a wrestling vignette where he's just doing all these moves that people are just like, whoa, high impact, holy crap, brain buster, you know? And you have him cut a 10-second thing saying why he's the greatest man that ever lived, and then you bring him in, you build him up for May, probably mid-May, all the way to when the X Division tournament would start in late June. And you have that tournament go by, and the tournament he would win, and the winner of the tournament would be determined in the first match of the card, so that the crowd can get woken up. And then the main event of Destination X, as it should be, would be the X Division title match, Austin Aries versus whoever it was at the time, I don't remember. And you have Aries win. And you just have him continue saying why he's the greatest man that ever lived. You can have more modern vignettes start to air with tapes of his matches, and you build him up and you build him up, have him defeat everybody that comes in his path, have him every pay-per-view defeating guys. On TV, you have him defeat guys in matches, and eventually very similar to how they did it. There'd be one or two contenders left, and then he'd get in a feud with Bully Ray. Bully Ray at that time was mocking X Division guys, and you could have had Austin Aries come out, and because Austin Aries would have been the heel at this point, I'd have had him a heel champion. I'd have had him come in as a heel, and he'd have come out and he said, "I don't like any of these guys in the X Division because I'm much better than them. I'm a far superior human being than them. However, I do respect them because not only is this the greatest division on earth to compete in, it is also full of the greatest athletes that live today." And you have him put over the X Division, and this would get the crowd on his side. And you have him fight against Bully Ray, and eventually leading to a match similar to how they did it, where he goes over this heavyweight, and you'd have the announcers start to say, "Wow, if he handled Bully Ray this well, imagine how he'd do if he was in the heavyweight division." And the last X Division guy he beats would be Zema Ion, heel versus heel, or not heel versus heel, heel versus face, because Aries would have been face at this point. And very similar at Slammiversary, you have him go through. The last regular X Division guy he would face. The pay-per-view before Slammiversary, he'd go through Zema Ion. Then you'd build up like they did to him and Joe. And you have Joe say, "I'm a former X Division champion. You've been wrestling a bunch of smaller guys who work that style. But what happens if you faced me, a bigger guy who works that style? I don't think you could beat me." And so you have them go at it at Slammiversary. Again, first match like they did. You give them good time to do it. And you have Aries go over. And again, after the pay-per-view, I would have Hogan come out because he's trying to defeat Rude at this point. He's trying to get somebody to beat Rude because he hates him. And he asks Austin Aries, "Hey, Austin, I've noticed in the list of contenders in the X Division, there are none left for you. You've beaten them all. What I'd like to ask you is if you'd like to give up your belt for a shot at the heavyweight title, because there's nothing left for you. And with this, if you win, you get the biggest prize in the company. You lose, you have nothing." And Aries would accept, like he did. I'd have had Rude mock the X Division and its style, talk about how it's just a bunch of little circus monkeys doing flips. He's not a real athlete like me. He can't beat me. He's not nearly as athletic, strong as I am. He's not as big as me. There's a clear size difference between the two. You just have him denigrate the X Division for the whole month of July leading up to Destination X, and Aries would go over and win the title like he did. I think it could have been much bigger if they'd have done it that way instead of the way that they did it. At the time, TNA made the same mistake WWE does, and they focus all their attention on the top of the card instead of in the middle of the card and in the lower card. Because you can have guys on the top of the card be the main angle of the show, but you don't have them on every 10, 20, 30 minutes. You don't have them on 5, 6 times during the show. You have them on one time. You have the rest of your guys fill up the card. Because you got to make room for lower, mid, and upper card guys. And any special attractions you have. So that's how to build up Austin Aries. Now going to Zema Ion. Zema Ion is lucky for me because he's got a character that if I was in creative, I would immediately know what to do with him. He's the super heel Filipino fashion model. And talking about how good looking he is. And he's been in there for over a year now. But I'd have, similar to how I bought in Aries, I'd have been vignettes. I'd have had Zema go to Japan. And I'd have had him do all these fashion shoots. And I'd have had him constantly trying to find the greatest and latest fashions. So he came to Japan where the style is the best he's ever seen. And he says he's coming to TNA. And every week he would be on TV. as you know, for the first couple of months he's on there. He's not going to be a big guy until later in this year. So you'd have him constantly experiment with all these fashions. But as he starts to become a component in the X division and a key one, around the time where, hey, Aries is giving up his shot at his giving up his title, we need to have a tournament. I'd have focused all my attention, a lot of my attention on Zema. I'd have focused my attention on certain guys. You could have had this thing where you have all this young talent, old and new, X Division, guys from outside the company, similar to the year before, and you'd have had him go over and win the title. And when he becomes the champion, his already extravagant style, you would have him go even more insane. And I'd have him go look at the J-Rock bands in Japan, because those are the guys that dress up the most fancy, the most crazy. He said, I've said for a long time now, fashion is all what I'm all about, winning and fashion. And so I'm going to go to the place once again and pick up some fashion tips. And his already extravagant fashion he picked up from Japan, you'd start each week do this more ludicrous fashion from based off of a J-Rock band, and you constantly have him look more feminine, look like a model. It's like a Rick Martel. It's like if Rick Martel went to Japan and got his ideas. It's not like he's a Hulk Hogan where he's at the top of the card. Zema Ion's the X Division champion. He's going to be in the middle of the card. And so you can have a guy like him, this cocky heel who's all about his look, and you could have him go over with the hairspray, and you have him go over clean too, because you forget the guy's a good athlete. You could do the Jesse Sorensen thing, but that'd have built up Jesse Sorensen better, because he looks a lot like every other guy in the country, every other regular plain-faced white guy who went to the gym for a few weeks and got a six-pack. But yeah, that's how I'd have done those two. That's how I'd have booked them if I was in charge of creative. For me, those were pretty easy ideas to come up with because their characters lend themselves to their gimmicks, and their characters lend themselves to those sorts of things. And I appreciate you guys checking this out if you have. Don't forget to subscribe down below or up above or however you do it. And see you on the next podcast.